Every day, we hear it: immigrants are taking our jobs. Migrants are draining our resources. But how many of us actually stop to question these statements? How many of us really understand the role that migrants play in our lives, and in this country? Today, we're going to challenge everything you thought you knew about migrants in the UK. I'm not talking about the illegals migrants you see sensationalized in the media. I'm talking about the legal migrants, the ones who followed the rules, who've jumped through every hoop, and who now work in sectors you rely on every single day. The truth about migrants' economic contributions. Let's start with the most controversial question: what would happen if migrants suddenly disappeared from the UK? It's a tough question to ask, isn't it? Because you've heard it a million times before, the narrative that migrants come here and take from the system. But let me ask you, who's really doing the work you depend on? Do you get your morning coffee from a barista? That's a migrant. Ever had your home repaired, your roof fixed, or your plumbing sorted? That's a migrant too. But it doesn't stop there. How about the NHS? When you visit your doctor, who is the one holding your hand in the emergency room, or caring for your sick relative? Migrants. When you hear stories of healthcare workers working overtime through a pandemic, risking their lives, those are migrants. So, when you hear politicians blaming migrants for taking jobs, think about this: the UK economy would crumble without them. Migrants make up almost 1/5 of the NHS workforce, not to mention essential roles in construction, agriculture, and hospitality. They don't just fill gaps, they keep the country running. You may ask, but aren't they taking jobs that Brits could be doing? Here's the cold, hard truth: no, they aren't. In fact, migrants are doing the jobs that most Brits won't. Ask yourself, how many native-born Brits are lining up for roles in care homes, fruit picking, or janitorial work? The answer is, not many. But these jobs are essential for society. So, when you look at the numbers, migrants aren't competing with you. They're filling jobs that allow you to live your life with convenience and comfort. You don't have to pick your own strawberries, and you don't have to clean up after yourself at the hospital. Because migrants are doing it. Let's now talk about something that many are uncomfortable with: racism. And don't get me wrong, I know many of you are good people. You'd never actively engage in hate or discrimination. But there's a blind spot here, isn't there? Migrants face daily racism in this country, and many of you are part of the reason it persists. Migrants are often treated like second-class citizens, whether it's by a colleague in the workplace, a customer in the store, or a passerby on the street. I want you to think about this: how many times have you heard a comment in your workplace about migrants being lazy or ungrateful? Or how many of you have witnessed racism in the pub or at family gatherings and stayed quiet? Let me tell you, every single migrant in this country has faced that at some point. And it's not just the unskilled workers. Even professionals, doctors, engineers, academics, are subjected to racial microaggressions and biases. So, the question I ask is this: are we really welcoming people who contribute so much to the country, or are we just comfortable with using them to prop up our economy while making them feel like outsiders? You need to understand the trauma of that. Migrants come here with dreams, they build lives, and yet, they are still seen as other in the very country that benefits from their labor. Let's talk about the big myth that keeps getting thrown around: the idea that migrants are draining the welfare system. This couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, migrants contribute more than they take. The average migrant pays more in taxes than they receive in benefits. So, let me ask you this: who's really draining the system here? The migrants who work hard and pay their taxes, or the billionaires who avoid paying tax altogether? The reality is this: it's convenient to blame migrants for everything that's wrong in the UK. It's easier to scapegoat those who don't have a voice than to hold those in power accountable for their own failures. But in doing so, we ignore the contributions of legal migrants, who, by the way, are here legally, working hard, and paying taxes. So, let's be honest about where the real problem lies. Migrants are not taking from you, they're giving back. And they deserve more than just your silence when racism or hate speech arises. I'm going to leave you with this final point: what do you really know about the lives of migrants? You see, migrants don't just face economic struggles. They face emotional ones too. They leave their families behind, leave their countries behind, and step into a world that often doesn't want them. They often work multiple jobs, pay exorbitant visa fees, and live in overcrowded conditions just to make a life in the UK. But despite all that, they're still expected to smile and be grateful. But here's the real kicker: they're not just struggling against poverty. They're struggling against a system that views them as disposable, replaceable, and unworthy of dignity. So, ask yourself, when was the last time you truly thought about the migrant who helps you, the migrant who takes care of your family, the migrant who picks your food? Do you really understand the depth of their sacrifices? But today, I want you to think about this: they're not the problem. They're the solution. They're the workers who keep the country going. They're the ones who help build the future we all rely on. So, here's where I leave it to you: share your thoughts. I want to hear from you. What do you really think about migrants in the UK? What misconceptions have you had? What do you still struggle to understand about their role in this country? Don't stay silent. Let's start the conversation.